Alright, in this video, I just want to talk about a couple of things that came up in discussions. And the first one has to do with talking to some Catholic fella. There's actually a couple of them. And they were defending the point of view that Jesus is not a Jew. Excuse me. And that he actually fought and spoke out against the Jews. And yeah, that it's solely the Jews that are guilty for the death of Jesus. And I was dumbfounded. I was like, really? You believe that? And this isn't a Catholic forum. And granted, there's only a couple of them that were saying this. One of them was more hardcore than the other. But no other Catholic really stood up and rebuked them and corrected them. It generally was just whatever, as long as they're Catholic, right? And I was like, this is anti-Semitic, anti-Jew, Nazi type of indoctrination here if you're going to say that Jesus is not even a Jew. So, went over the definitions of a Jew. There's three definitions of a Jew. There is Jew by bloodline, because you are from the bloodline of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So you come from the 12 tribes of Jacob, you're a Jew. You can be a Jew by religion. So I got this menorah up here. You can practice Judaism and convert to Judaism and be a Jew by religion. And then there's the third definition of a Jew, which ties into being from the tribe of Judah and from the area known as Judea. So if you're from Judea, kind of like if you're born in America, you're an American, then you're a Jew. If you're from the tribe of Judah, that was their area, you're a Jew, right? So those are the three definitions. But this Catholic wanted to say, no, we go by the Bible and the Bible alone, right? He was mocking that idea and saying that no one calls Jesus a Jew, and he never calls himself a Jew, so he's not a Jew. So he has a fourth definition of what a Jew is, and that is you have to be called one or call yourself one. And I was like, okay, yeah, I know you're probably saying, why am I talking to people like this? Why waste my time with some obvious trolls and whatnot? And it's a way to actually interact with people and get to know them and to know if, hey, is this person really believe this? And if he does, why does he believe it? And if he's just trolling, okay, he's having his fun. So be it. But I've talked with this fella a few times about serious stuff that had to do with Catholicism and whatnot. So I think he truly believes it. Matter of fact, it's not the first time I've heard him talk about anti-Jewish stuff and borderline Nazi propaganda, but I never really engaged him in conversation about it until now. And he was actually saying that Jesus is not a Jew, and I was kind of baffled, and I was like, you know what, that might be a problem with some Catholics. Keyword some, is that they are anti-Jewish, and the Jews wrote the Bible. Jesus is a Jew, the apostles are Jews, and they wrote the New Testament of the Bible. So it's basically a book by Jews for Jews and those who believe in the Jewish God. And they don't like that, so they put the Bible on the back burner off to the side, and they want to bring in their Gentile, heathen, pagan practices and religious point of views and make them the focus and keep that Jew stuff in the back. And that explains why they're against the Bible, is there's a lot of anti-Semitic sentiments in Catholicism, and that's not something that's new. That's well known, and Jews talk about that and what have you, and we can see it ever since the time of Jesus and when Rome destroyed Jerusalem. But anyway, So I was going by this fella's definition, and I was like, okay, well, Jesus here is talking to a woman, and she's like, hey, our ancestors said to worship at this mountain, but the Jews say to worship at Jerusalem. And Jesus says, ye worship ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. Jesus is a Jew. He calls himself a Jew right there. He goes, we know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. He calls himself a Jew. So by his definition, he's a Jew. And this guy, this is where, I'm going to admit it sounds like trolling, because that's clearly what he's saying here, is he's a Jew. And there's nobody who's going to try to say that Jesus is not a Jew unless they don't care about what the Bible says, they don't care about truth, and they have an agenda, such as convincing Christians to follow their anti-Semitic movement, namely Nazism. But anyway, this guy wanted to say salvation is of the Jews because the Jews killed Jesus. And I was like, what? So the salvation is of the Jews, not because Jesus is a Jew and he brings salvation, but the Jews gave us salvation because they killed Jesus. And I was like, okay, that's nonsensical. But let's continue with that idea. In John chapter 19, it says here, verse 10, then saith Pilate unto him. Pilate's a Roman, the head of the Roman occupation there in his little area. And he has the power to protect Jesus from the Jews and save him from being harmed in any way and be put to death. But he doesn't exercise that power. It says here, then saith Pilate unto him, speakest thou not unto me? Knowest thou not that I have power to crucify thee and to have power to release thee? Jesus answered, thou couldst have no power at all against me except it were given thee from above. Therefore he that delivered me unto thee hath the greater sin. So here Jesus is saying, yes, the Jews are guilty and they have the greater sin, but you also have sin. Because how can theirs be greater if he doesn't have a sin at all? He doesn't say, oh, the ones who delivered me, they have the sin and you don't. And this guy wanted to say, Pilate washed his hands of it. So Jesus says here he still has sin. He had power to free him, but he didn't. He's just like, no, I wash my hands of it, do what you want with him. He could have helped him and protected him and saved his body, but he didn't. He gave him over to the ones that wanted to kill him. It's kind of like let's say somebody you care about, and you got your home, and it's your wife, or let's say your children, one of your children, and the neighborhood wants to kill him, but you have the power to protect them in your home because the people aren't going to come in your home. You have a gun. They don't want anything to do with you. They just want your son, or they just want your daughter, and they're going to kill him. And you're like, why? And come to find out, they haven't even done anything wrong. But according to their culture, they don't like something they do or say or what have you. And you're like, no, but they keep getting at you. And you're like, you know what? I wash my hands of this, and you let them take your son or your daughter. Are you guiltless there? You washed your hands of it. You said you washed your hands of it, and you put your hands in some water. Does that mean you're free from any responsibility, any obligation, or what have you? Pilate is supposed to protect the citizens there. And he even says that he finds no fault with Jesus, so he's innocent, yet he gives him over to a mob that wants him dead. That's not sinless right there. There's no washing of his hands of that. That's just a way of pretending like, there's nothing you could do, and, you let it go, and you're like, I have nothing to do with this. Is you don't want to take responsibility. You don't want to exercise your authority. You don't want to exercise your power. You don't want to cause any kind of strife or anything. You just whatever. But yeah, some Catholics, it's like, no, it's all the Jews. No, it was a joint effort. You see, at the time, Israel represented the church, the believers, and the Romans represented the state, the government in charge. And right there, the church and state combined killed Jesus. Later on, the Christian church merged with the Roman Empire and did the same thing, and they started killing Christians. But anyway, this next thing was a conversation where it was a Sabbatarian saying that you have to keep the seventh-day Sabbath, which is Saturday, or you don't love God, you don't know God, you're not saved. And even if you keep the Sabbath, it doesn't mean you're necessarily saved, but you're in better standing if you keep the Sabbath. And I was talking to him with somebody else, and we were telling him, hey, the Sabbath is a sign between Yahweh and the Jews of their covenant that was made with them at Mount Sinai. It's not a moral law or anything like that. It is a sign between the nation of Israel and Yahweh of their covenant. It wasn't a command any time before that. So this guy says, yes, it's a command in Genesis, the first Sabbath. And you can read here, this is the only mention, and there's no command at all whatsoever. Keep in mind that Adam and Eve didn't do any work. There was nothing for them to rest from. They weren't even created until the sixth day. It says here, this is after the 6 days of creation. It says, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. So you see here that this first seventh day, God rested from his work and he sanctified that singular day. There's nothing about a memorial to this every seventh day or anything like that. There's no command. It wasn't as if God said, you must rest on the Sabbath or you're kicked out of Eden. There's only one command given in Eden, and it's down here. He tells him you can eat of any of the trees, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you can't eat, or you'll die. So in other words, if that's the only command, they could work on any day, and there's no punishment. They weren't commanded to keep the Sabbath. It was a day when God rested. And then at Sinai, he issues it as a sign that you're worshiping the Creator in that covenant. It was not a command before that. There was nothing at all about it being something that signified you were one of God's, or that because you didn't keep it, you were going to die. There was nothing like that before Moses. And the Jews even talk about that. Jews will talk about how Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were not really full Jews because they never kept the Sabbath, because they were not part of the covenant at Mount Sinai. The covenant that was given to them was an unconditional covenant of grace. The covenant at Sinai was a covenant of works. It's a completely different covenant. So this is, commonly taught amongst the Jews. And people like the Sabbatarians today, who are Christians that want to be Jews, really push this when they're not part of that covenant, and neither are we, yet they want to push on you the sign of that covenant. And it's really just nonsensical. This guy was trying to say, well, he blessed it and he sanctified it. Yeah, he blessed that first day that he rested, that first Sabbath. It doesn't say anything else about another day. It doesn't say anything about a command. Blessed does not mean command. Sanctified is not a command. So, and there wasn't anything about it afterwards, after they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. There was nothing about, hey, remember the creation by resting on the Sabbath day. There's nothing about that. Matter of fact, we go to Romans chapter 2, and it tells us about that the Gentiles are judged by following their conscience, that not having the law, they're a law unto themselves. And when you look at that, you look at your conscience will get on you if you dishonor your parents when you're young. Your conscience gets a little seared when you get older. So a lot of these things don't bother us so much as we get older. But lying, our conscience gets to us. Stealing, adultery, fornication, our conscience will get to us. But the Sabbath is not something that the conscience is aware of, because it's not a moral law. It's a sign of the covenant between Israel and Yahweh. And if you're not part of that covenant, you're not obligated to keep the seventh-day Sabbath unless you want to. But if that's what you want to do, I recommend you learn about God's calendar, where you can read in Genesis as well, because that's where he established the Sabbath. But he also established how the sun, moon, and stars are how you are able to actually know the times and the seasons. And the Sabbath is actually kept by the moon. So if you were lost on a desert island and you had no idea what day it was or anything, you could tell the Sabbath by the moon. When you saw the first sliver of the moon, you know that next day, the daylight, is the Sabbath. And then from there, you would do 6 days and then a Sabbath. Very easy. You just use the moon. And the thing is that people don't like that, because at the end of the month, because sometimes in a lunar month, it's about 29 days. Sometimes it's close to 30. Sometimes even down to 28, depending on when you see the slither of the moon. So there'll be a period of like 3 or 4 days where you just had a Sabbath and now there's the new moon. So it's not a full 6 days. But that's how God set it up. And you would follow according to the month by the moon. So if you were lost on a desert island, that's what you would do if you were a Sabbath keeper. You would use the moon. There's no excuse for you to not know when the Sabbath was. And you find that also that the day period, the 12-hour period of daylight, was actually the Sabbath. During the night, when they saw the moon, it wasn't as if people were stoned to death for working that night because it was the Sabbath, that it started at evening. No, the day started at sunrise. And a lot of Sabbatarians are against that as well. But I have some videos about that. If you want to get deeper into the lunar Sabbath and the day-night cycle and all this stuff. But with that being said, I think that is that. I just had these couple of things come up. And when you're in a conversation sometimes with somebody, even if it's in person, talking face to face, you don't always get everything out that you want to get out, and not in a clear, precise way. And doing a video like this is just a way to do that, just to get it out and clarify everything, your whole argument and your point of view. So that's what this is. Thanks for watching, and take care.